The first time she said it, the cafe went quiet. Mahira leaned back in her chair, one manicured finger circling the rim of her latte. "Relax, Aisha," she purred, dropping her sunglasses to the table. "You can have the house. Keep the car. Keep the sympathy, too. I don't need any of it. I have something better." She tilted her head, smile thin and bright. "At least my baby has a father." She laughed then, light, cruel, practiced. Heads turned, my throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. "That's a big claim to make in public," I said. Mahira's eyes flashed. "You think he'll choose you?" She paused, savoring the next line the way a cat studies a cornered bird. "He already chose me." I counted my breaths. 4 in, 4 out. "Enjoy your coffee," I told her, and stood up. On the walk home, I did what I always do when the ground shifts under my feet. I made a plan. If you'd asked anyone who knew us, they would have told you Ryan and I were solid. He was a rising project director at a tech firm, the kind who got called into late meetings and flown to last-minute conferences. I was a forensic accountant who noticed things other people skimmed: misplaced decimals, round-trip payments, names that showed up twice under different spellings. We were both busy, but we'd been busy together for 8 years. We had a rhythm. Then came the nights he didn't answer, the shirts that smelled unfamiliar, the smile that never reached his eyes. I told myself it was a season. I told myself to be patient. Then a private number sent me a photo. Rayan at a rooftop bar. Lips against Mahira's ear, their hands threaded together like vines seeking sunlight. 2 days later, a lawyer's email slid into my inbox. Polite words asking about amicable terms. I brewed tea, read it twice, and wrote back requesting a meeting. He replied, "Of course. Let's keep this civil. Aisha? Civil." I smiled at the kettle's whistle and turned off the gas. I didn't confront Rayan that night. I cooked his favorite okra stew, plated it neatly, asked about his day. He shifted in his chair, guilty and grateful, reaching for stories that wouldn't touch mine. When he fell asleep on the couch, his phone slid to the carpet. I picked it up, held it a moment, and set it on the table without a glance. I didn't need his phone. I needed records. At work, numbers soothed me the way lullabies soothe babies. Numbers don't lie, people do. I spent lunches in the break room, scrolling public filings, corporate registries, land records. I wasn't digging for the affair. I had that. I was mapping the shape of his future, how he meant to move money, what he meant to keep. Rayan had always wanted a lakefront apartment. I found the deed for one, closing set for 6 weeks out, buyer listed as a shell company formed 3 months earlier. The signatory? Mahira's older cousin who worked in real estate? Cute. 2 more shells had been created within days of each other, each with a different cousin listed. Layer, 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 like lacquer on rotten wood. I printed nothing. I wrote nothing down that could be subpoenaed. I memorized. At night, I emailed myself news articles, fully public, easily explained, and kept reading. When his lawyer sent over a draft proposing we mutually waive discovery to preserve privacy, I replied that I was happy to move quickly. No discovery. Just a fair split, of course. The house to me, yes, as Mahira had taunted. The retirement accounts split evenly. The stock options, vested and unvested, valued at execution price. He could buy me out with cash. Rayan balked for a day, then said we should talk. "Come by Saturday," I suggested. He arrived with a bouquet like penance. I put it in water and set it between us. Its scent, a clean lie. "I want you to be okay," he began. "You know I respect you, Aisha. This just happened." "Things don't just happen," I said. "People make choices." He stared at the flowers. "So, the house, yes. The accounts, yes. The options. We can work out a number. I can't liquidate everything right now. Cash flow is tight with..." He stopped and then said too quickly, "With bonuses delayed?" "Tight?" I asked mildly. "With the promotion?" His jaw went stiff. "Aisha," I let it go. "Then give me security," I said. "Collateral until the cash is there. The small apartment on Maple?" His eyes flickered. He had never mentioned Maple to me. It's complicated." "Oh," I said. "Complicated." We signed a memorandum of understanding that day. He left relieved, convinced the hardest part was over. After he was gone, I took the flowers out to the bin and set them gently in the trash. Mahira's laughter lived in my head like a dare. Chwamandia, at least my baby has a father. She said it again 2 weeks later when we ran into each other outside the obstetrician's office. She rested a hand on her flawless stomach. Second trimester, she announced. We chose the name already. Congratulations, I said. She dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. He wants to name the baby after his grandfather. Imagine that. Me sitting in your old house, feeding his grandson under your roof. She pulled out her phone, scrolled theatrically. A little gift list if you want to be helpful. When are you due? I asked. December. Her smile sharpened. Plenty of time for you to move out. Plenty, I agreed, and made my next appointments. Some women slam doors. I booked meetings. First, a quiet lunch with a partner at an insurance firm. We talked about prenatal policies, about coverage quirks no one reads, about the increasingly common parentage confirmation riders bundled into newborn plans to speed processing. Signatures, consents, chain of custody, dry words that knit a net. Curiosity? He asked as we finished coffee. Professional interest? I said. Next, a visit to land records to pull every deed with Rayan's name and every entity tied. To his associates. Then, a call to a friendly journalist who owed me 2 favors. Not a story, I told her. Not yet. Think of it as an educational packet. What kind of education? She asked. The kind that keeps investors nervous, I said. Finally, I called Mahira. I'm planning a baby shower for you, I said, a smile in my voice I didn't feel. A send-off. Let's keep this kind, yes? No reason to make a war, she squealed. You're sweet when you accept reality, Aisha. Reality, I thought, is a strange word on her tongue. The shower was at the house she wanted to paint over. I sent invitations to her friends and to a very short list of mine. I set out platters of bright fruit and tea sandwiches, hired a photographer to give it all the sheen of generosity. The games were tasteful, the gifts expensive. Mahira glowed under the attention, one hand always on her belly like a queen holding a scepter. Rayan arrived late with lilies and apologies. Mahira kissed him in the foyer like a claim. A few guests clapped. Open mine last, I told her when the cake plates were stacked. She rolled her eyes playfully. Is it a blender? It's practical, I said. For the hospital, the gift was a neat basket, a robe, soft socks, travel toiletries, and a sealed envelope from the insurance company, pre-filled forms, and a chip-enabled card for direct benefits if paperwork was completed at admission. On top, the letterhead explained the parentage confirmation clause in friendly language. To ensure seamless newborn benefits, both parents may be asked to sign. It was nothing more than what we'd discussed for lunch. Oh, she said, flipping through. She looked at Rayan, teasing. They want your signature, Daddy? Guests cooed. Rayan puffed. Of course, he said. Anything for our... He caught my eye then and faltered. Our what? I asked softly. He dropped his gaze. Our child, he muttered. Mahira laughed again, the same high bell. At least my baby has a father, she said to the room, and they laughed with her because cruelty wears a prettier dress when it's wrapped in celebration. I smiled under the hum of voices and cut the cake cleanly down the middle. I didn't plan the universe's timing. I just moved with it when it swung my way. A week after the shower, a small scandal whispered through Rayan's company. A vendor list with duplicates, a question about reconciliation, nothing public yet, just a tremor under the floorboards. I didn't start that rumor, but I did send my educational packet to 2 investors who hated surprises. Rayan came by that night, late enough to be ashamed, early enough to pretend he wasn't. I need to talk, he said. He stood in the kitchen twisting his ring. There's noise at work. It'll pass, but can we delay filings? The divorce, I mean. Just a month. Of course, I said, if you sign the consent today. What consent? For Maple, I said lightly. Collateral, remember? Security until cash isn't tight. He stared. Behind his eyes, the gears ground. Aisha, Maple isn't really complicated, I know, I said. Untangle it, or we proceed tomorrow. He signed. He didn't ask how I knew the unit number. When December came, the city went silver with breath and frost. Mahira's labor started at 2 a.m. Rayan's text woke me by accident because old habits die slower than marriages. Heading to hospital, it said. Wish us luck. I lay in the dark and listened to the radiator knock. Then I got up, made tea, and drove to the hospital. Not to the maternity floor, to the lobby coffee stand where the night nurse on break liked to sit. She waved when she saw me. "Your friend went up about an hour ago," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Big family, lots of selfies already." "I'm just dropping off a gift," I said. "They have the insurance packet?" She laughed. "They never read those until we shoved them under their noses." "Do you?" I asked. "Every time," she said cheerfully and took her tea back upstairs. I sat for a while, under the false dawn of fluorescent lights, until the lifts dinged and an orderly with heavy shoulders wheeled a bin past me. The world was waking, a baby's thin cry threading through ceiling tiles like an alarm. I drove home, showered, and dressed. I put on the black suit I wore to court when truth needed a costume. At noon, my phone buzzed. A photo of a sleeping infant, a caption with a name that wasn't Rayan's grandfather's, a second ping. "He's here. We'll register birth later." I replied, "Congratulations." Then I gathered my folder, locked the house she wanted, and went to the lakefront apartment whose keys I'd quietly acquired. The naming ceremony was 2 weeks later, a crowded December afternoon full of sugar syrup and chapped lips. Mahira wore a long white dress that made her look fragile and expensive. Rayan stood beside her, sleeves rolled, hair damp, the newness of fatherhood softening his angles. They welcomed everyone like a team accepting an award. I waited until after the prayers, until the baby was passed like a blessing down the line of aunties. I waited until Mahira caught my eye and smirked, performing pity the way some people perform music. Effortless, practiced, cruel. Then I stepped onto the small platform by the fireplace and raised my hand for quiet. 2 minutes, I said. "I promise." I held up the folder. I brought a gift. It's only paper, but it's the kind that matters. Rayan frowned. "Aisha, this isn't appropriate?" I finished for him gently. "Neither is breaking a home and calling it romance. But here we are." Mahira set her jaw. "You embarrass yourself." I smiled. "I've brought 3 documents. The first is the transfer for Maple, recorded yesterday. I accepted it as collateral months ago. Thank you for signing, Rayan." He paled. A whisper passed through the room like wind through wheat. "The second is a note from the investor relations head at your firm," I continued. "It's not a public story, yet. But it would be a shame if your private vendor shells, Seton Holdings, Morris Ventures, K. Owl LLC, were confused with actual suppliers. Rayan, you should call your counsel before Monday." Someone coughed. Someone else swore softly. Rayan's mouth opened and closed without words. "The third," I said, laying my palm flat on the folder, "is from the hospital. It's a routine thing, really, to speed newborn benefits. A parentage confirmation clause that asked both parents to sign so the insurance card could be activated right away." I looked at Mahira. "Do you remember the packet? From your shower?" She rolled her eyes. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe. But the clause generated a lab slip," I said. "You both consented at admission. It's not a court test, not definitive for custody. Just a little administrative check to make sure the right parents get billed for the right baby." Silence pooled on the hardwood floor. I slid the final page from the folder. "Congratulations again," I said softly. "He's healthy, beautiful, and according to this preliminary, unlikely to be Rayan's genetically." The room inhaled, as one. Someone's glass hit the table too hard and cracked. Mahira laughed, instinctive, defiant. "You forged that." "You think an insurance company risks forgery?" I asked. "Call them. Or call Dr. Shaw. She'll confirm the consent and the chain." Rayan made a sound I had never heard, a cross between a laugh and a choke. He reached for the paper. I let him take it. He stared, lips moving silently over numbers. Then he looked at Mahira, who had suddenly become very still. "You told me—" He started and stopped. Mahira's eyes darted to the baby, then back to the door, as if the world had offered her a trapdoor and forgotten to leave it open. "At least my baby has a father," she said, but her voice wavered now, and it wasn't a boast. It was a plea. "Rayan, say something." He did. "Whose is he?" No one moved. Even the baby seemed to hold his breath. When she didn't answer, he turned to me, like a man clinging to a rock in a flood. "You did this." "No," I said. "You did this when you made a child into a weapon and a woman into a trophy." I nodded at the paper. I just prefer my facts with citations. He sank into a chair. Mahira's mouth opened, closed, opened, again. Her cousin, the real estate cousin whose name appeared on my memorized list, stepped quietly backward toward the hall. I'll send you both the full report when the lab finalizes, I said. In the meantime, a few housekeeping notes. Rayon, your counsel can call me Monday about the Maple transfer and the options valuation. If the firm decides to self-report, you should get ahead of it. Investors hate surprises. I looked at Mahira. As for you, don't bring my name into your next story. I don't mind being the villain in your versions, but journalists prefer documents, and I have plenty. I closed the folder and stepped down. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. Behind me, the room erupted. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was worse than that. It was the sound of a party deflating. Chairs scraping, murmurs turning mean, a child asking too loud questions, a grandmother sighing in a way that means I told you so. I slipped on my coat and walked out into the cold. Didn't see Rayan for 3 months after that. His lawyer wrote, tight and clipped, offering to settle immediately. I agreed. The house remained mine. Maple became mine too. The options were valued at a number his counsel hated, and a judge would have liked. We met in the middle. The shells were unwound publicly. 2 people were reassigned. Rayan took a leave of absence to focus on family. He moved into a rental by the highway. Mahira posted 1 photo of the baby after the ceremony. No captions, just a tiny fist against her shoulder. The comments turned, then fell silent. 3 weeks later, she set her account to private. I heard she left the city. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I think about that last day in the cafe. The way she laughed, bright and sure, like the future, had already written itself in her favor. At least my baby has a father. Maybe he does. He should. Every child deserves one. It just wasn't the man she used to hurt me. The universe has a way of making room for truth when people won't. 1. Evening in spring, Rayon called. I let it ring twice before answering. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. For what? I asked. For the way I rewrote our life, he said, like I was the only author. For a moment, I remembered the early days, the noodle shop, where we spent our first paycheck, the way he once kissed the ink smudge off my thumb after I'd been marking ledgers late into the night. Then I folded the memory and put it away. I hope you become someone your child can be proud of, I said. Whoever he belongs to. He inhaled. Aisha, do you ever forgive? Sometimes, I said. But forgiveness and forgetting aren't the same. I don't plan to do either for you. I paused. Take care. I hung up and stepped onto the porch. The lake lay flat and dark, the sky the color of a bruise healing. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's wind chimes tried out a melody. I didn't cheer or dance or drink anything bubbly. Victory wasn't the point. Truth was, safety was. Walking back into my house without flinching at the walls was. Inside, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Not to plot anymore. To plan. There's a difference. I wrote a list with small, ordinary lines. Repaint the study. Call the roofer. Plant basil. Learn to sleep in the center of the bed. When the wa'a kettle clicked off, I poured a cup and blew gently across the surface. Steam drifted, soft as an apology I didn't owe anyone. I smiled. Not the brittle smile you wear for cameras, but the good kind. The kind that lives behind your eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Not like Mahira in the cafe, sharp as a knife. I laughed quietly, like someone who knows that the final silence, the one you choose, the one that's yours, isn't empty at all.